No.
That's fine.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
It's not good. Laura and Elizabeth, you guys are good on screen. Excellent. Then I will call to order this PVUS meeting for March 9th. And we'd like to recognize that this meeting is being held on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lillooet Nation. Any changes to the agenda? Approved. Max, second by Director Kennett. Opposed. Motion carries. We don't have a closed portion, right? So rise with the report. We don't have anything. We're on to 5 consent agenda. Somebody would like to move the consent agenda. Director Max, second by Kenneth. Opposed. Carries. Any business arising? Seeing none, we're on to 7.1, the SLRB CAO report. Mr. Dawson.
Nothing, Chair, thank you.
It's one of our best meetings so far. CEO verbal report from the village of Pemberton. Ms. Tracy, anything?
Yeah, through the chair, just briefly, last meeting, there was a question about the property in which the museum sits. And I just wanted to respond and share that that is designated parkland of the village of Pemberton.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just didn't quite hear.
Ms. Tracy followed up on the question as to the ownership of the land where the museum is, and it belongs to the village. And as parkland, it's leased to the museum.
Okay,
This is owned as parkland.
cool.
Awesome, thank you. That's it. Okay, motion receive. 2, any opposed, motion carries. We're on to 7.3. This is regarding the playscape relocation. Ms. Burns, are you presenting for this?
I am. Good afternoon, Chair and Council. Thank you for having me. I think it's the bulk of presentations are me today. Gonna just spread myself out a little. The first report that I'm here to present is just an update on the playscape relocation on the Pemberton and District Community Center grounds. So as you're very aware, the village of Pemberton received monies to expand the daycare. And as a result of the daycare expansion, that has resulted in the requirement to remove and relocate the nature playground. So this is just a report updating you on everything that has transpired to date. At the regular meeting of council, number 1575, held on Tuesday, February 28th. Council redirected that staff develop a community engagement plan respecting the proposed relocation of the playscape feature, and that we present that engagement plan at the committee of the whole at a prior time when that is complete. So we will be developing and engaging in creating an engagement consultation plan for community to have their input on where they would like to see that space relocated to. Attached to this report is all the information that has been shared to date with Village of Pemberton Council. And we're excited to be moving forward with engaging the community and getting their feedback on the process. If you have any questions on that report, I'm open to those questions.
Christine, unfortunately, I haven't read the report, but this computer glitches this last week for us. Anyways, can the playscape be relocated on the grounds that's there somewhere?
That is what we will be engaging the community about. So
Right.
there are a couple of options proposed, as well as there's been.
I'll just shore these.
Oh, okay, for sure. Okay. You can look and I'll just explain that there's also been lots of input received by council from community members through letters to mayor and council.
Right.
In regards to potential for other options as well. So it was deemed a priority to engage the community on the process. So we will be going out with some community engagement, which obviously once it's approved through the village of Pemberton, I will share with the PVUS committee as well what the process is going to look like at that time. We're hoping that we we've already started, and we're hoping that we present at a committee of the whole either end of April, beginning of May. And that would bring me back to PVUS, probably ideally right before we try to do the engagement. So, and we're hoping to have that all completed before school lets out in June, so that we can make sure people are here.
Yeah, communication, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So just to give you a little more context too, and if you look at the screen there was a couple options presented by staff and the landscape architects. Option 1 and 2 are the ones most contemplated. Originally, option 1 was come forward and some of councils felt that it eats into the Great Lawn. And there's concerns around that that's a gathering space. Should it be put up further up top? So that's just to give you the context, and that's why it was decided that maybe we need to get a little more input, because it seemed like there was sort of mixed thoughts on it and on where the best location is. There's been some correspondence, but yeah, that's sort of how we got to a point where we said let's engage the community a little bit more, see where they want this thing. And Christine and her team will put that together and bring us back results. But once you get your computer back up and running, and or once the engagement started, head over there too and have a look at the space, and then I'll give you so how we got it.
Yeah, is it coming as soon as the weather permits? Is it coming down soon or?
The playground itself?
Yeah,
Oh, the majority of it was removed in the fall.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Due to the need to put a fill on the property. So the majority of the playground was removed middle of November. So we will leave the remaining pieces of the playground up as long as we can here. The surface has been compromised, so we will potentially get the rest of the playground out as soon as the ground allows us to, or when construction begins on the daycare, which is fairly imminent as well.
cool. I just wanted to say, I see the hoops are up.
Yes,
That's so cool. Yeah,
They've been used.
have they?
Yes,
In the snow and all?
pre this last snowfall. So I'm hopeful that the kids shovel it here this weekend in the pouring rain that we're anticipating. And they spend a lot of time on it during March break.
Yeah,
The day after the rims went up, there were kids out there shoveling it off.
Yeah.
if I could just make one little comment, I think it's great. I think it'd be fun to have a little sort of basketball tournament or something, and you have the village and the SLRD and maybe the Lions Club and, you know, maybe one other organization, the Rotary or something, and we could have a grand opening or something and a little basketball thing and a few snacks or something.
Yeah, I think you'll see when we get to the recreation draft budget presentation that there's some capital allocated for the surfacing of the space.
Yeah.
So we want to wait until we're
That is
complete.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it's a necessity, and I think Graham Murphy has a team that is has a bunch of avid basketball players on his crew that might be willing to take on the VOP and the SLRD and Lions, and so yeah, definitely we'll sort something out for ideally in the fall, probably.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Any more questions about that report?
Landscape, we're all good. We have a motion to receive that report. Not, anyone, Kenneth, opposed, motion carried. And Director Ramsden, if I miss you on the screen at any point, please speak up, because I'm in the habit of looking for your hand there, so don't let me miss you. Or Ms. Tracy. We're on to 7.4, which is the Rec Services Manager, Parks and Fields, fees and charges.
Thank you, Chair and committee, for receiving me again. So recently, I went to the Village of Pemberton Council to update their fees and charges bylaw in regards to parks and outdoor spaces use fees. As you're aware, we update fees and charges consistently for recreation, and this was an update that became apparent that we needed to do in regards to, ideally, this one is mainly in regards to the parks and outdoor spaces due to the fact that they didn't have designated rates identified for commercial and outdoor space, commercial and corporate uses in outdoor spaces. I think probably because it was not something that the village had ever really experienced before. However, Denda Park has become an extremely desirable location for people to recreate and commercial groups to rent. So we needed to come up with some fees and charges for the outdoor space there. So this summer we have already started applying rates for commercial use of Denda Park outdoor spaces for youth and adult purposes. The fees that were devised were based on some research that I've been doing in the last year amongst, I think I pulled from about 12 different municipalities that included everything in the Sea to Sky corridor down to North Van up to Lillooet, as well as other municipalities that are of a similar size as ours to ensure that they were on par and within reason. So that is Schedule M of the Village of Pemberton Parks and Fields fees and charges, and it's it's. Look at me, I forgot to highlight the bylaw number 797, I believe. Yep. Oh, no, sorry. Bylaw number 942, 2023 update for the Village of Pemberton. So through the chair, if anyone has any questions, please.
Pretty straightforward.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Like to make the motion as presented. Matt, seconded by. Yeah, opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Burns. Now we're on to the recreation budget. 7.5.
All right, thank you very much, Chair and Committee. I would like to invite us Mr. Sikora, our Finance Manager.
Two seconds, I presume we'll let Suzanne.
Please do, yeah.
Good to go. Sorry, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. LaFrance. First, I would like to acknowledge the hard work that the two finance managers have engaged upon in order to create this draft budget for recreation. As you are very aware, up until now, well, this time last year, our facility was closed. So I'm not sure, I keep reminding people of the fact that this time last year, our doors were closed still due to COVID-19 and public health orders. So we didn't actually open the doors of the facility until April 19th, 2022. So last year's budget was reflective of the fact that we were still in the throes of COVID and we didn't know what we were going to anticipate from a restoration of services potential. So this year, you'll notice some significant shifts because we are anticipating moving forward full speed and full steam ahead. I think it's important to acknowledge that the actuals are unaudited at this time because the Village of Pemberton hasn't completed their fiscal year end. And then I think it's also important to acknowledge that there are some significant increases reflected in the operational needs out at Denda Park due to the completion of the second soccer field as well as the completion of the bike skills park. So we have had to take into consideration operational expenses for things like hydro, lights, water, labor, and additional equipment in order to maintain those spaces. From there, I think that we can go to the appendices, and Appendix A is the preliminary unaudited draft of the recreation budget. And I would welcome any questions. And should I not be the correct respondent, I will defer to Mr. Sikora.
Awesome, thank you. So the biggest increases here are around Denda Park, is that what I mean?
The largest increases I think that you'll find are Denda Park, as well as for labor. Because prior this time well, this time last year, we weren't even remotely close to completely staffed. So at this point in time, we are remotely close to completely staffed, as well as we anticipate approximately $20,000 additional in the Q4 of this year due to the fact that we are proposing that we open on Sundays after Thanksgiving weekend as well. So we go back to 7 days a week of operations for what we consider the latter part of fall and winter season. So you would see that reflective in the 2024 budget as well for, and that will be more as well because we'll anticipate more time open on Sundays in 2024. So I think that is a fairly significant portion of that. And then Denduff Park, obviously, we've had to allocate staffing expenses. For maintenance purposes, there's maintenance equipment that is going to be a necessity to maintain those grounds. And we anticipate a parks operations employee being out there half-time. So that's fairly significant increase to the budget.
Any questions from the committee?
Yeah, so all these increases, like they're kind of staggering, actually, like now, if I'm reading this right, so for the SLRD contributions to recreation, it's a 244.5% increase. Is that correct? It's on page 6 of 8.
And that would not be correct, unless you're referring specifically to the Denduff Park.
Yeah, well, this is, Denduff.
So if you're looking at Denduff Park, that would be correct. And that's, as Ms. Burns described, driven by a large increase in, the major increase of having a halftime parks worker out there. And additionally, the second soccer field is completed. So we've got now a full season built in, along with the bike skills park. And all the maintenance required with the additional approximately $3 million of assets.
So that's new to both SRD and BOP.
Pardon me?
That's new costs to both sides, to both partners.
Yeah, I understand that, but
New assets.
going, wow, that's quite a dramatic change, right? Like,
Well, by percentage, but it's because we're paying for something we didn't pay for at all before. It's not like we're paying for more for something we paid. We're not paying 240% more than we used to pay. It's something we didn't pay at all. You know what I mean? We didn't have to maintain that field or a bike skills park, so the brand new costs. So for sure.
so maybe that's not the best way of presenting it.
With the percentage, I mean.
Yeah.
It's a standard column, but I hear what you're saying. It isn't.
Because if we're starting from scratch, maybe we should be starting from scratch, right? Because the constituents out there are gonna look at this and go, my God, like, you know, here where people are struggling to pay for their groceries and fuel and such. And we're saying, you know, the cost of maintaining these fields just went up 244.5%. Well, in fact, that's not the case if you say we're actually at 0 and then going forward, if say next year it's a 10% increase or a 6% increase.
Yeah, it's how it's read. I hear you. I mean, and we're not starting from 0 because we did have the original soccer field.
Yeah.
So we're starting from that in the general grounds to.
But it's, I think that's going to be a question that will be asked, obviously, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think to just perhaps provide a little more confidence, the deployment of the public works staff at halftime, again, it's an estimate, there's a learning curve. They bring great experience from one of the golf courses. So the idea here is that the maintenance of the fields will be excellent for the high utilization, the durability and kind of rigorous program needed to fertilize, top press water. Essentially all the costs of operating the facility will be managed very efficiently as well. And the hope is over time, there's savings or learnings as the assets have some experience and the interaction with the various user groups are, feedback is taken and so forth.
Questions? Around me, I'll get there.
I don't know, I was just wondering if the costs of the initial investment of building like the bike park and all of that, that's included in that percentage then?
It's
No.
not.
No. This is just the maintenance.
This is the operating expense of
Okay.
the assets, yes.
Okay, yeah.
If it's, if I may liken a current highlight that I'm excited about, we've met with Pemberton Youth Soccer and Lillooet Recreation just the other day. And we're expecting significant use there of just the fields. To begin with, I think Pemberton Youth Soccer has gotten grant money from Via Sport. And I think BCRPA to bring in some specialists to have somewhat of a jamboree that is, you know, to recruit more soccer players and to provide coaching opportunities for the volunteer coaches that they have. And that's May 6th, 7th is what we're shooting for, to have them out on those spaces. And from a recreation perspective, it's super exciting that we have a nonprofit organization that is going above and beyond to increase their users and their membership, so that those amenities are going to flourish and be very popular. As well as, you know, the addition of the fees and charges for commercial and corporate entities really applies to the use of the Bike Skills Park. So this is just one step in the right direction of us starting to generate some revenues from those spaces as well. But as Mr. Sikora has mentioned, this is really going to be our first crack at this from an operational perspective post-COVID. Mr.
Well, I look forward to next year's numbers then.
Go ahead, Mr. France. We can hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that the Dendorf Park amount does include capital of 95,000 for the soccer nets. So just because you were saying it was all operating, there is capital in there as well.
Apologies. Thank you, Ms. LaFrance.
So
It's also includes equipment. So the capital expense in there is for nets for the fields for public use, as well and user use, as well as equipment expenses to maintain those fields.
did not Area C put money forward to pay for a set of those nets?
From my understanding, yes, Area C contributed to Pemberton Youth Soccer Association for them to purchase a set of nets.
Yeah.
However, with there being two fields there, we need a second set, and we need a larger set than what Pemberton Youth Soccer is going to be purchasing for themselves, because we need to be able to accommodate adult users out at those spaces.
So there's just the one set that has been paid for I guess the smaller field by
that is going to be
that Area C money,
Yeah, yes,
and then
correct.
the other set would go on the large field.
Correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rick.
Is there any agreement with the Lillooet Nation and the Quaqua with their soccer players? I know there's quite a few First Nations soccer players, and is there any funding available from that side?
At this point in time, they do have a very robust soccer program for all, like they have a U21 as well as a U18 team, and then they have an adult league as well. So at this point in time, what we did with the fees and charges was we added in fees for nonprofit and government organizations that those fees will kick in for 2024 use schedule, because we need to allow those users to have some time to acknowledge the fact that they will be paying to use the fields moving forward. And at this point in time, you know, we're building our relationship with Lillooet Recreation, and there are other things required out at the fields. You know, the users would like dugouts and things like that. So we're working with all the users to determine the best approach and potentially doing some grant writing and things like that to acquire those sorts of things. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, would somebody like to Make a motion to approve the budget. Dr. Max,
Receive the report.
receive the report, we don't need to. Okay, well, approve it as part of the next,
I think
as part of 7.6. Okay, so motion to receive then. Dr. Max, seconded by Dr. Kennett. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And that leads us right into 7.6, which is budgets. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Oh, yes.
Audience members for a few minutes, I was just curious about.
Absolutely. When you're all good to go, Mr. Thomas.
All right, I'll share my screen again just to show the budget sheets as I go through them. And so just reiterating the non-market change, we have about 26% of non-market change within our assessments for the completed role, which is definitely beneficial to absorb any taxation increases. It's very rough estimate though, not every individual assessment will move the same. So there's always variations within individual assessments. So we already have we had 3 budgets approved at the February meeting, but one I've brought back for revision, and it's just the Pembina Valley Trails budget that's coming back. But we've approved at the February meeting the Pembina Search and Rescue budget and the Pembina TV and radio budget. So we'll start with the Pembina Fire Rescue budget, which I have budgeted at the agreement level of increase, which is 7.2% to $103,549. Last night I received updated budgets with different figures that I don't know how to address at this point, but right now the budgets as presented is 7.2% increase. So we'll leave that, we'll put a pin in that for a while, and we'll go through the easier ones. So we have Pemberton Refuse next, and that shows a 44% increase, 44.7% increase in taxation to $711,709. And we have the Pemberton Recreation Services, which is all of them grouped together, show a 45% increase for a requisition of $1.463 million. There is an additional amount I allocated into the Pemberton Recreation Service of $78,000. Just because we overpaid for the Pemberton Recreation Service in 2021. And we haven't received that funding back. And I have a sneaky suspicion that it's within the surplus within the Village of Pemberton's records. So I've added that into the budget for receiving funding for, and it is being taxed on and then would be available for the village and for everybody to spend. As of now, that 78,000 is just reserve funds from the SLRD. And unfortunately, the backstory is it was during when there was no finance manager, and Nikki Gilmore was actually the acting finance manager as well as being the CAO. So I think that in the shuffle, this additional overspend wasn't noticed because of the changeover of finance managers. So I'll get to that as well. So those are 2 items that we have to address at this meeting, being the fire rescue service budget now coming in higher than what I have in these budgets, and then the overspend in 2021 for recreation service. So the Pemberton Museum service is shown at 40% over their 2022 request as recommended by the PVUS Committee, and that's a 26.6% increase. And the library service shows a 7.9% increase. And so combined, as they are laid out right now, all the PVUS services have a 32.3% increase. And the The taxation rate, however, due to the assessment shifts, both in market and non-market, show that it's only about 8% increase, 8.78% increase. So a $500,000 home would see an increase of $34 over 2022. And that's just an estimate, because the completed roll is not actually the roll that the constituents are taxed on. It's the revised roll that they are taxed on, and the revised roll is not out until near the end of March, and so not available at this time. So the forecasted figures are still not final, but they are close to final, but they still might change between now and an adoption date. And if the PVUS committee does not want to recommend approval of these budgets to the board, we might have to create a special PVUS meeting to deal with the services that are not approved. And that would have to be before the financial plan adoption, which hopefully is a separate meeting that we're requesting to be at the end of March. All right, so the Permanent Fire Rescue Service, we recently received information from the village that they would like to charge, sorry, one moment, I'm just going to pull it up because I can't recall the exact number. Oops. Sorry, bear with me. And this, of course, isn't approved yet by the fire committee meeting. That's going to be next week. So it's a little bit of a workaround. Can't make it bigger because this stupid sharing is in the way.
Are you referencing something that's in our package?
No, it's fresh information just received last night.
Just for clarity, I guess I'm trying to understand process here through the chair. May I ask a question? Would this normally be processed before the committee has the chance to view the documentation?
Yes. This rescue service is a PVUS shared service, whereas the fire protection service is not.
Thank you for the clarification.
So the new amount is 124,296, and that's in reference to so it's about $220,000 over what is shown in the budget currently. How would the PVUS committee like to address this?
Well, it's kind of hard, without seeing it, I don't know if Mr. Score wants to give us any context.
Pardon me?
Did you have your hand?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So the thing that I'm having difficulty with is we should have met, like on the fire budget stuff, we should have met months ago to discuss these increases. So like right now, the way it's presented before last night's numbers, I'm more than willing to adopt that 7.2% increase for the rescue service. But to have this other number dropped sort of in our lap at the last minute without any consultation or, I mean, even getting to have a look at it. We got to get this fire committee program and live up to the terms of our contract. We're supposed to have 3 meetings a year, the fire committee. And for whatever reason, we haven't had one for a number of years. So we need to get that program back online so that, you know, we know what the village is planning on as far as how much it's going to cost the regional district, Area C, how much is going to cost those constituents to have fire protection and all that stuff, right? The rescue service is a separate budget altogether outside of that fire stuff. And that budget is set up between the village and Area C. And it's the rescue service is to provide rescue service, road rescue service for all of Area C. That's the way it was originally written. And that's the way that I want to see it continue. I don't want to see it. I mean, there's obviously some portions of Area C that are mountainous. I mean, they're right out of the question. But as far as the road rescue part of it goes, all the roads in Area C are covered by this budget. But anyways, to have the numbers go up so dramatically, kind of at the last minute, and you know as well as I, our budget process is not timed the same, right? Between the village and regions. We got to have this all done by the end of this month. So we're like, well, I mean, Suzanne's probably tearing her hair out thinking, I got to have this all done in 2 weeks for the board to approve it. We've got a special meeting going on now. So anyways, back to that thing. We have to get, you know, our act together as far as politicians, staff, to make sure those 3 meetings a year happen. We're all up to date on everything and we know what the program is. Because I know for a fact that if I start putting some of these proposed increases forward to my constituents, I get feedback from them now thinking they're paying way too much for fire protection, all this stuff, right? So, you know, I'm not going to go to them and say, oh, by the way, it just went up another, you know, god awful amount. The cost of living, I believe that 7.2% was the cost of living in November when we should have been discussing this. So absolutely, that was the cost of living at the time. And, you know, I think now it's in the 5s, but I'm more than agreeable that that would be the number that we use. So there we go. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, we see it every year. We're on different budget cycles and it impacts when when Thomas and his team is able to bring numbers forward and you know, unfortunately it finds us out of step a lot and I don't know how to fix that, but it is clumsy for that. I agree. Thomas, can you give us a little clarity on those? I mean, the idea was to have a fire budget meeting or a fire committee meeting this morning. But you want more time at the budget, so that's.
Yeah, well, the point is, excuse me, but we hadn't even seen this thing. So here we are, we're gonna have a fire committee meeting. And, you know, I'm talking to my CAO and I'm going, I haven't even seen this thing. Well, we hadn't even seen it. Suzanne hadn't seen it, right? So here we're now presented with a whole whack of numbers that have gone up quite considerably. And we're going,
that's fine.
yeah, so it's just, you know,
And again, if Tom,
we gotta have time.
if you could speak to the timing of it, maybe a little bit, you know, our constraints in terms of bringing our numbers forward. But yes, you're right. We're under the gun in terms of getting it all done. I think there is a connection and, you know, there is an overlap, like you say, fire service and road rescue are separated and on paper, there is an overlap in how the services are provided. And I think that's one of the things that's being considered here and needs to be talked about. But yeah, I mean, these 2 budgets I think should come forward to the committee for discussion and we'll turn them around right away, I guess. But go ahead, Ms. Tracy?
Yes, through the chair, and of course, Thomas will be able to speak to this in more detail, but I think that one of the things that we're challenged with this year is changing dynamic and the need for the fire rescue services. And so based on that, we're put in the position of creating a budget that reflects those changes, as well as what the status quo had been. And so what the hope was to be able to articulate that through a presentation at the fire committee meeting. But without that explanation and presentation, of course, you know, that leaves a lot open to interpretation. So I think Thomas maybe could speak to this a little bit more, but that was certainly some of the intention in bringing this directly to the committee.
So again, recognizing that we are under time constraint and that we need to see the numbers, I think the idea is we rescheduled the fire committee. Let's put both these budgets to the side until that meeting's had, because there's a lot of context, as the CEO Tracy just said, there's a lot of context to be given so that we can have a good conversation about what makes sense and what doesn't, right? And that has to come to the fire committee. So we've got that, I think, rescheduled for
Next Wednesday.
Wednesday?
Yeah.
So let's do that. And what does that mean in terms of that? You're gonna then force a special meeting, PVUS to make? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, just one other question for Ms. LaFrance and our requirement to have the regional district budgets available to the public for 2 weeks to hopefully meet an end March time frame. Can you just speak to what's been proposed here? Are we still going to be able to do that? And can we do that with the 7.2% as stipulated in the agreement for now and change it if it changes, or how does that impact the process we have to follow?
Yeah, so I'm required to have 2 weeks of public consultation. So my goal is to have these budgets completed for next week. So they have opportunity, the public has opportunity to review these amounts. So this does cause an issue, and we can put in whatever we'd like in the draft budget for the public to view, but it's not really following the proper process, right? Where it's a PVUS approved draft budget, because the PVUS meeting wouldn't be in time for the 2 weeks consultation. Basically, I have to start this consultation next week. So that's my deadline.
So through the chair, so for the purposes of that process, Ms. LaFrance, can you next week, could you go with the numbers you've introduced today, and would you need a PVUS decision today to do so, pending any changes that might come out of another PVUS meeting?
Yeah, we could put in the budgets, whatever the PVUS committee desires, but it would be nice for them to decide which amount they would want to put into the budget. Either the one that is in front of them right now, or the one that the Village of Pemberton requested, which is $20,000 increased. And I could put that in as the draft, and we can still have a proper PVUS meeting after the fact to approve it. But I think that we should try to give the public the real number if possible.
So what if we were to just trying to sort through this? What if we were to go with the higher number, and then through the fire committee and PVUS, if we peel it back, that's better than going the other direction in terms of what the public is seeing.
Yeah, I would, I'm not comfortable with the extra like 20 grand on top of the 7.2%. That's getting up into the high 20
I
numbers.
haven't even seen the rationale why, so it's not,
Well,
I'm just trying to help through the process.
No, but it does. I mean, we have an agreement on how much it's supposed to go up every year, and this is going up dramatic. And where does it stop? Because as you know, Mike, from the time I started doing this job, our budget, the fire budget, has increased dramatically.
Okay, but
And it's continuous.
This is a fire committee discussion. The point is.
Okay,
we're
what
not
I'm gonna
have
do
a
is I'm gonna make a
productive
motion that we go with a 7.2% increase. And that's what gets factored in here now for the fire rescue budget. We're gonna discuss the fire budget at the fire committee meeting next week. But I'm gonna go with the 7.2%, not the 27% or whatever it is.
Director Ramsey, go ahead.
Sorry. Director Mack, I understand your concerns, and I would say, you know, tacking on an extra 20,000 to the request and conceivably approving it without seeing what the rationale is. And I have not been here as long as you have. I hear your concerns about the time, but I'm just wondering in terms of the overall procedure and approval process, if what we do in the draft budget is published with a higher number, knowing that we're not approving that, and can always peel it back, it just allows us to not mess with the timeline that's required for public consultation. Because I guess my concern is if we just stuck with the 7.2%, there's a fire committee meeting, we have a special PVUS meeting, and we look at it and say, you know what, actually there's a great rationale for this increase, or maybe a bit more, then we're kind of stuck in a position where that number hasn't been presented to the public and won't have the time for that 2-week consultation. So if we start with a higher number, at least we're getting consultation as to kind of worst case scenario, and we could always peel it back.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Square, you have some clarity?
Yeah, I would just highlight perhaps a little bit of
Come and
context.
sit up here, Thomas.
Oh, certainly. Just a little bit of context, which apologies, it was really challenging to get time in front of. I appreciate everyone's busy, and between all the committees, there's a lot of stakeholders who were available as early as April when we checked last month. So it's been a bit tough, but I would say with the context of the increases, there were a few proposals that the Village of Pemberton presented for the fire committee's consideration. So the lower of the two is what Ms. LaFrance has highlighted. But I would highlight that the trigger for the fire committee meeting is when it exceeds that November CPI threshold, that 7.2%, I believe, stated. And that doesn't account for changes on year-over-year approvals. And I might remind the committee that last year an additional firefighter position was approved. So that approval itself, when factored into the budget, takes it above that threshold to begin with. So that compounded with some cuts that were made last year at last year's table, which we recommended would not meet the service demand of the rescue service, have put the rescue service from a budgetary perspective in a very challenging spot. And what the materials that are presented to the fire committee highlight is what the entire service looks like and how the growth in the community is met with a very, I think, quite challenged budget. Like there were a lot of reductions that Chief Adams presents in that budget. You'll notice most line items are at or below CPI. There are a lot of very thoughtful efforts to reduce costs where costs were possible, but the majority of the increases that are reflected are simply to support the paid on-call service, the volunteers that are making like very low remunerations. So it reflects the service levels, and it's spelled out in that package. But the hope is that at that committee meeting, we can walk the committee through the rationale behind that budget and split and the implications of the fire service billing versus the rescue billing, because it is the same officers working downstairs that are going out to the community and servicing at perhaps a different split than was previously noted. The last point I would make is, though there's a CPI growth based on a baseline number of calls and assumptions that was made years ago, the CPI increases in effect compounded what was a 75-25 split of fire to rescue calls, and it's closer to a 50-50 split in terms of the number of calls that the officers are going out on. So that's reflected in the budget as well. And
See, and if I can, we just respond to that. We haven't seen any of that
That's the
information.
whole point. No,
No, but that's,
I get that.
that's the whole point of the problem.
Director
haven't
Matt,
seen anything.
we get that, and we know that, and we recognize that that's a problem, and that, again, our timing with our budgets, not a great thing, and here we are, so I get that, it would be great if you had it a month ago, and you had time to work it through. You have it in your hands now, it'll give you time to look at it with the CAO or Mr. France, if you like, and wrap your head around it prior to our fire committee on Wednesday. On Wednesday, we'll have a conversation around all these, I'm happy to discuss, as always, all your concerns and thoughts around the budget, but you need it in front of you. I get your frustration, I really do. I know it's late. But
Well, I know if you were in my position, you would be livid.
I wouldn't be livid. Right now, what I'm trying to do is find a path forward, Russell. I'm trying to find a path forward, and the point is, this is not about blame. This is not about blame. This is where we are right now with this budget. Our timing has never meshed well with these services, with these budgets. Can we work harder to make them time better? I like to think so. We can put our best people to figuring out a better process for next year. I get it. So it's not a matter of, I'm not blaming anybody in this room or any other room. I don't think that's necessary. Here we are in that you needed some time. You did not want to walk right into that fire committee today. Totally justified. Got it in front of you. Gives you a few days to work through. Let's have a fulsome conversation on it next week. Right now, what we need to figure out is how does that all fold into Suzanne's time constraints and making sure that that process is respected.
So I'm gonna go back to the 7.2% number.
I think,
You know, and if in fact we do increase it as we go along, then we'll have to explain and justify why we did that. But I don't wanna go and put that extra 20,000 on there now and put it, I think it's a 27% increase in there. Let's put the 7.2% in there, sorry, and then we'll work from there.
So let me ask you this then, because I'm hopeful that we're still all going into the fire committee with an open mind as to what's being presented by our fire chief. So let's say at the end of that meeting, and I'm just gonna make up numbers, you don't want to go
And it's
27.
fully justified.
It's
And we-
not even
yeah,
27, even
yeah.
if it's 12 or pick
Yeah.
a number.
Yeah.
We then have to go to the public. And we don't have the 2 weeks that Suzanne needs for the public to have seen that. So I know you're trying to protect. If we put on 27% now, I promise you, it's not a way to make it happen and secure it. It's a way to say, here, public, this is the worst case scenario. Actually, after further meetings, we've reduced that all the way to here, if whatever it is. But it's just to make sure that what the public has in front of them for the next few weeks, there's no surprises at the end of it. If we do agree as a committee at the end of next week that we should go up 11%, 15%, now we're throwing new numbers at the public. And that's where the problem lies. So it's not a matter of trying to get you to agree to a higher percentage now. It's more to say, hey, this is worst case scenario. We can peel it back to whatever the committee decides. But at least we're not throwing extra. And I think that was sort of the point of Laura's comments. Go ahead, Jen.
So what happens if the 2-week window isn't? Does the sky fall down or?
Suzanne, you want to speak to that? All right, great.
Yeah, I'll defer to Suzanne, but yeah, the sky would start to cave in on us a bit.
Yeah.
It's, we're already beyond where we need to be from a regional district perspective in developing our budget, but I'll defer to Suzanne.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact repercussions, to be honest. It's just a legislated 2-week window as a minimum. So that's the minimum requirement that we would need to meet. And next year, I hope to even make it the budget process more time. So I'm hoping to have like a month for public consultation next. So just be prepared. But I don't know what the repercussions are. We might not be able to have an improved financial plan potentially. And then we might not have funding for services potentially. That's the extreme worst case scenario.
Oh, I think. I just like to say, Russ, maybe we need to give Suzanne that 2-week public consultation. That seems to be pretty important. My question in the past, has there been a lot of public consultation on these, but on the fire budget or the museum budget or any of the budgets? Yeah, is there a lot of public input usually?
No. Currently, we just have the financial plan, the draft financial plan available on the website. It's not there yet, but for the 2 weeks of public consultation, that's all that we do. And then people can go to the website and review their services and then submit any questions, but it's very little input normally.
Okay, how do we want to move ahead here? Yeah, the option.
I just like a comment is maybe if there is, after the consultation with the fire people in the meeting with them, Russell, maybe the numbers will be a little better and more justifiable if there has to be a bigger increase, and maybe we need to sort of move forward so they can have the public consultation. What do you think?
I don't know, I just think this whole thing just kind of, yeah.
We didn't have as much angst when it came to a $40,000 increase for the museum. That was pretty quick to say they do great work and we don't put the same. So I think to leave, you know, we listen to them. I think we need to give time for our fire chief to provide services to Area C. And I know it's late in the day.
And what I'm telling you, Mike, is we haven't had that ability to have that. The museum people came here and presented to us.
And
So we know what they're doing. I have no idea what these guys are doing. All I see is increase, right?
on Wednesday, you will know, is my point.
So that's why I hate like hell to be making decisions on numbers right now when we haven't even had the discussion.
If I could, through the chair, I know this is a challenging conversation and as Suzanne indicated, I know we're all committed to enabling you to have a different conversation next year. I think for the sake of moving it forward, a decision is good. Whether it's the low number, the high number, a number is good, would allow Suzanne to do her bit and we'll move forward. So I think what's the better number for the public, high or low? I would just recommend that the committee make a call and we go. And I think either one will work.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I had already made a motion to go with that 7.2, so I'm gonna stick with that.
Okay, second,
I'll second it.
is that a new hand, Laura, or is that your old hand up there?
That was a new hand just before we got to the vote. I was just wondering also if kind of to allay some of the concerns is if we could structure the motion in such a way that it's clear that, you know, for the purposes of presenting the draft budget to the public, we approve, you know, we're approving with the higher number, but, you know, some sort of language that makes it very clear that we're not actually approving that number. So that way, because my only concern is if we go with the lower number if we try to increase it after the fact, if what I'm hearing is correct, it sounds like if we were to then approve a higher number, the budget could be subject to challenge. And that just to me seems like a very big risk where if we approve the draft budget with the larger number, provide this language in the resolution that kind of says very clearly, we're not actually approving it. We're just approving it for the purposes of providing public consultation. That gives us the wiggle room to decide how we want to move forward following this fire committee meeting, and protects our 2-week timeline and public engagement, and make sure our budget is not subject to challenge on those grounds.
Suzanne, if we were to change to a higher number, does it mean our budget would be subject to challenge, or is it more just that we've sort of not been as transparent as we want it to be?
I think that we would have to make a special PVUS meeting to approve the amount, whatever it ends up being. So we have to make sure that's before the financial plan adoption. But other than that, I don't think it can be challenged just based on changing the draft budget.
Elizabeth, did you have something that?
Yeah, if I may through the chair, I guess my recommendation would be that there were two distinct numbers that were supplied, and this is actually not reflective of the higher number at this point. Thomas will be able to articulate that better, but I guess if this is the consideration to go with the higher number, you should know what the actual is.
Okay. So the thoughts on the table are, I agree with Mr. Dalton, we need to get a number out there. If it has to be changed, doesn't sound like it'll challenge the budget, but people might be upset that the draft doesn't reflect the final. That's, I think, what's mostly at risk here, by the sounds of it. Is that a new hand, Laura?
I guess I'm just, if there's if the legislation says we have to do 2 weeks of consultation with the public with a draft budget, but I guess that doesn't necessarily talk to it changing after the fact. So that makes me nervous doing that, but that's, yeah.
Okay, any other comments? I have a motion on the floor. I haven't had it seconded yet. And
I seconded it.
okay, so any other discussion then? Okay, call the question. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. So that, Suzanne, leads us back to you.
I'll start sharing my screen again.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Sorry, what was that?
So we'll go to the Pemberton refuse grounds next. So the main change to this budget based on last meeting is we added so there was invoicing that came late from Sabre for a generator rental that we added into the service, which increased the deficit carry forward. And so there is a slight increase in the requisition requested versus last year. This was the amount was highlighted. I'll just go to the budgets to show. I think I have them here. Oops, there it is. So this $11,082 is a new invoice just received, added into 2022, which increased the requisition request. Are there any questions about the overall permanent refuse grounds budget?
Did we not have a $70,000 deficit that we talked about? Is that in this or somewhere else?
Yeah, this is now, it's an $84,000 deficit because of that new invoice that just came through.
So I had at the time said that I would offer to put a sum of money up to cover that deficit so that we move forward at a zero level. I guess my question is, can we use gas tax funds to do that?
No, the gas tax funds have to be infrastructure or long-term plans. So there wouldn't be an availability for.
But we can use amenity funds.
You can. I don't know if it's necessarily needed for this service. It is an increase, but it is still within the available requisition.
Okay. So anyways, I'll just put this out here. That offer is still open if you feel that it's necessary.
Okay. I don't think that we should pull amenity funds from Area C
Okay.
at this point.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Please?
Any other?
I'm not seeing any.
I just have a question, Mike. So with a 44.7% increase over this year, does that include like any other equipment that like capital investments that might be needed, or it doesn't? This is just operating costs and.
Yes, there's no assets for 2023 budgeted, and the 2022 asset, which is the permanent transfer station build, was covered already via long-term borrowing
Mm-hmm.
and short-term borrowing.
Can I ask what the increase per household that translates, like how much does that put the taxes up? I've just been hearing a little blowback in the community about, I don't know, numbers have been floated around previously and.
Yeah, just for the permanent refuse site, the cost for a $500,000 home would go up $15.34 on average, but that doesn't take into account market shifts. So a $500,000 home in 2022 probably is a little higher than $500,000 in 2023, correct? So it doesn't take into account that, but generally, if they were the same value, it would be $15.34 of an increase.
My comment on that is there's very few $500,000.
No, but so $1.5 million home would be
Yeah.
$45,
Right,
right?
okay, somebody quoted me,
Yeah.
oh, my taxes are going up $134 or something, and I'm just going, oh.
Maybe
man.
overall. Is that?
No, just because of
We
the,
haven't put our tax rate
Yeah.
yet, so.
but,
Yeah.
you know, that's just my comment on that. I just thank you, Suzanne. I just gives me a better perspective. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no more questions, would somebody like to approval of the refuse budget? Dr. Max, seconded by Dr. Kennett. Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right. The next budget is the permanent and district community fund, which I don't have any notes on because it's just a small amount that's carrying forward that will be used. I think we have to reallocate these funds currently. They're allocated from old resolutions and there's some unallocated amount. So yeah, there was $597 remaining for Stewardship Pemberton for kitchen time that we may want to revisit. And also there's some unallocated funding from this service. And that's all that's in this service right now because we have the new 2 PDIF funds that replaced this service. But we still have to approve this budget as well. So these amounts are continuing to carry forward until we spend them or allocate them within this service. And so will the PVUS committee just approve this budget as well?
Can we just transfer those into one of the PDIF funds and close this service at some point, or?
Yeah, that was considered, but because the service areas are not the same, the new PDIF funds do not include Wedgwood's properties, and this one is all of Area C. So technically, I'm not allowed to just move funding unless it's the same service area.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll have to find a way.
So
to
then
spend
we
it
just
this year.
leave.
Well, we'll approve it as is and then
Yeah.
find a way to spend $2,343 on the community this year. It was fun.
Yeah, so we can do that.
Okay, so move
Yeah,
approval of the district community fund budget, Director Maxon by Director Kennett. Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, so the next budgets are the permanent district community recreation service budgets, and those are the rec center, including the Nendorf Park and the youth and senior center. So they do include the 77,000 overpayment from VOP up to VOP in 2021. And The amounts that have increased just for with that addition, it is a 45% increase. Oh, sorry, 1 second.
Laura got her hand up.
Sorry, there's someone at my door and my dog's just going crazy. I don't know if you heard that. But there's a 45% increase for these services over 2022 so far. The majority of the increase, as mentioned, was the Dendorf Park. Sorry, I'll switch this from permanent soccer field to Dendorf Park. And that's an increase of 105,000, 244%. And then the rec center, which it does include the 77,000 addition, is 36% of, and it's 326,000 over 2022's ask. I'll just go to these budgets. So this is the amount of the ask from 2023, but I did plug in the 2021 overpayment into 2022 forecast, as we do need these funds back. Like I mentioned, it was during a time of employment change at the Village of Pemberton. So I have a feeling it's within that surplus that the village has for recreation services. Any comment, any feedback from the PVUS committee about this?
So I guess so if that if that 77 comes back, where does it come back to? Just comes back to the regional district?
Yeah, so what happened
And
was
that changes those numbers.
Yeah, then if this was approved as is, we wouldn't request the funding back from the Village of Pemberton. They haven't supplied it as yet, so that's why I added it in. And basically what happened was there was invoices from the village for this COVID grant amount that we agreed to supplement in 2021, as well as a $40,000 error that was from 2020. So we received this invoice and paid it. But then when we sent the annual recreation service funding, we paid it again. So there was a double payment that we haven't received back yet. And it's basically from SLRD own operating funds.
So it doesn't really change the budget. It's just the repayment of.
Yeah, so that money should come back just to tidy it up. Because right now there's $77,000 of SLRD NRDC money in reserve over and above what should be there. So that money should come back. And then it balances it out. Is that correct then, Suzanne?
Yeah, there's two ways to deal with it. Either we add it in like I have it currently, which just makes everything even. So we have basically we have the amount that we actually sent to the village correct. Or I take this amount out and we receive the funding back from the village.
Which is half a dozen to one, right?
So it's either or, yeah.
Same net result.
Yeah.
Same result.
Okay, well, whatever you feel comfortable on.
So move as presented then?
Yeah.
Or approve as presented. Okay, second. Any further discussion? Nora, is that a new hand?
No, there shouldn't be a hand there. I will remove it if it is.
Okay, perfect. Call the question then. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Right. And was that a motion for all of the recreation services then? Or just that
So,
one rec center?
Does that include Pembroke Meadows Field and all that stuff then?
Yeah,
Correct?
but if that's you. So the motion is for all the recreation budgets.
Okay. Hey,
Did you need them separate, Suzanne, or is that okay?
I don't think we need them separate.
okay, I'll move that.
Okay.
Can I ask a question too?
Can I
Like,
call the question? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
hey, so the Pemberton Meadows fields are still owned by the school board, which we lease from them, correct? Have we ever approached them lately about actually acquiring those fields? Because I've been told by our MLA that what the school districts throughout the province have been told that if they want to build new facilities within their districts, and they have extra land sitting around that's not being used, they have to sell that land first to get those assets, and then the province will buck up. So, you know, there's stuff going on that they want to do. Maybe now is the time to say, hey, just to give you a heads up, we are still interested in buying those properties or that property. I don't know if this is the right location to do that, or.
I mean, I was thinking as you're talking whether something should be in camera, then land acquisition, that might go in camera.
Oh, okay.
But maybe I'll take it another step. We've talked about a council wanting to get together with the school district to talk about a number of issues, like Signal Hill use, stuff we've talked about before.
Yeah.
Maybe this could be part of that meeting.
Mhm.
So did we, Ms. Tracy, did we direct staff to try to set up a meeting with the school district, or did we just talk about it at this point?
We've just talked about it at this point. I think the first step was to understand what our current relationship is with them in terms of usage and things.
So how about taking back to council, and when we decide it's the right time to try to call a meeting or invite?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Frost.
So the youth and senior center, is that part of recreation or is that?
Yes.
Okay.
She's.
Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute. I apologize. So we approved all the permanent rec service budgets. The next are the PDIF funds. The Arts and Culture PDIF fund is shown with the increased requisition of for 15,000 as was requested at the February meeting. And so that budget is,
That budget's moved by Director Max, second by Director Kennett. Any opposed? Motion carries.
all right. And similarly, the Economic Development PDIF was increased $10,000 as requested.
Moved by Director Max, second by Director Kennett. Any opposed? Motion carries. And just a reminder that those are the requisition. We don't need to use it all. That's just to make sure we have the room. Go ahead, Mr. Franz.
Yeah, that's right. So any surplus funds just carry forward to the next year to be available. So we have the museum request, which was adjusted to be just $20,000 over, $40,000 over 2022. And that is now 189,992 of a request.
Okay, thank you. So this we didn't want to approve this last time because we wanted to see it in the context of the whole budget and other potential increases. So comments from the committee? Anyone?
So I guess it just Suzanne, so where does that if we were to approve this, how much of an increase is that then? Museum specific, I guess.
Well, it's 40,000.
Yeah.
Which is
About 217, so it's 189, that amount there, Russ.
So it's a 26.6% increase in dollar value, which is $40,000. And we would just notify the museum of the change via a letter because it's not the exact amount that they requested. So we would send them a letter letting them know that the approved amount was not the requested amount.
Thoughts?
Well, I think a $40,000 increase to the museum is a good little chunk and they should be happy with that, I think. They don't have a lot of capital expenditures and they seem to be getting a lot of grant money. And the last time I looked at their budget, they had quite a little bundle in the bank, so. I think upwards, I could be wrong, but I thought there was about 100,000 they had in reserve there, so.
So, did somebody want to move the budget with 40,000 or a different increase or no increase or? Looking for a motion.
You want to move to 40?
Yeah. I'll move that we increase it 40,000 as per the discussion at the last PVUS meeting.
Okay, seconder, any discussion? Director Ramsden, go ahead. Oh, no. Is that a head shake? No? Okay. Call the question then. Any opposed? Motion carries. It takes us to.
Sorry, the next budget is the Pemberton Library. And this is as requested, which was an increase of dollar value increase of 7.9% or $31,000 or 409.
So it's, yeah, it's a 7.9% increase, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just give me 1 sec. Yeah, any thoughts or?
Yeah, I'm actually okay with that. So it's 7.9. So in November, it was the cost of living was 7.2. So they're not very far off the cost of living for that point in time. So yeah, I'll move that.
Okay, seconder. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so that takes us to the end, I believe.
Cemetery?
Yep, so we have two more, just the Area C cemetery. They didn't submit a request this year, but with discussions, they're happy with the usual $2,500 amount of funding that they have every year. So it's actually what they had in their 5-year plan last year, just $2,500 straight across. So that's what I've plugged in for their submission.
Okay. Any questions?
No, if they're satisfied with that, I know they've got some other works planned, but they're looking for like grants and all that kind of stuff. So if that's what they're requesting and they're happy with that, then I would definitely support that.
So moved as presented, second. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries.
And then the final budget is the Pemberton Valley Recreation Trails, which the requisition hasn't changed. It's still flat to 2022. But there was some reduction, So there was some changes to move the forecast to 2023 expense. And then the added savings I put into the operational surplus reserve for future operational needs. So in essence, the budget didn't change that much. It's just a couple line items that I want to be clear about. As this budget was already approved in February, I just wanted to make sure that these changes were also approved, and I'll just get there in 1 second. And so it was just this amount was 6,500 in previous version, and that's been moved to 2023.
Questions? Moved by Director Matt, second by Director Kennett, opposed. Carries. We'll go next.
And thank you. That's the PVUS budgets did we want to try to set up a special meeting to discuss the fire rescue budget?
So we have our fire committee meeting on Wednesday morning.
At
Is
9 a.m. Yeah.
that what we set up on? Mr. Dalton, how much turnaround do you need to set up a meeting here? Special PVUS meeting.
I think now's the time to pick the date and time if we could.
So like, could we turn that around for like the following Monday, for instance? Or,
That's the following week. So fire committee's next Wednesday.
Board meetings 22nd, 23rd, but yeah, I guess Suzanne has to have time to compute everything and all that stuff, so.
So we need meetings Wednesday morning, and we need time for Suzanne to create her document. Then we need to at least 3 days notice publishing that agenda. So Suzanne, what kind, do you want a couple days?
what about Monday or Tuesday, the 20th or 21st? Is that too soon?
I think that'll be fine. It'd be really quick. It's just a one-line item budget. It's just creating the documents would be very quick. It's really just to reaffirm the confirmation of the amount of taxation for that service.
So I'll propose Monday, the 20th or Tuesday, the 21st at 9 a.m. So any of those not work?
I'd say Tuesday, just in case.
Give a little space, just in case. Tuesday at 9 over, Elizabeth? Okay.
Unfortunately, I will not be available to attend MMOA.
Okay.
I do have someone in acting though.
Yeah,
I could likely
Thomas.
attend on my behalf.
Yeah, okay.
So
Okay,
that's a special PVUS meeting okay.
So that's March the 21st at 9 a.m.
yeah.
Do I have to be there?
So do we need a motion to set that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You can fuse it.
Can I get a motion to set?
Yeah, well, I just thought it was the special fire thing. No,
No.
this is to adopt that
Yeah,
after that.
Whatever we.
Okay, I got you.
Numbers, yeah.
Okay,
Motion
So let me
for a
write-
Special meeting on March 21st, moved by
Yeah.
Director Max, second by Director Kennett, opposed, motion carries. Decision on late business, we have no late business, notice of motion. Motion to adjourn. Director Max, second by Director Kennett, any opposed, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.